In this episode of The Setup, I am joined by Mikolai Stroinski, who has composed music to convey emotion, tell a story, and add depth in video games for the last 16 years. He has written over 40 projects and is best known for his music in League of Legends, Metamorphosis, Bee Simulator, and Witcher 3. He has received awards for Best Video Soundtrack numerous times in his career. I am super excited to welcome you, Mikolai. How are you doing?
Hi, thanks for having me, Sydney. I'm doing very well.
So, music has always been a great way to create compelling stories like that and evoke emotion, especially in video games these days. This is incredibly true for my favorite, like I mentioned, The Witcher 3. I know it's been some time, but as a background for the listeners, Witcher 3 is an enormous open world video game in which players get to role play different characters, and it has received over 300 awards, with it being the Game of the Year in 2015. So we have a little bit of a time in between, but you guys might be familiar with the Netflix series Witcher, which came after the video game, and both of them derive from the fantasy novels. It really has created a new wave for players and audiences because of these series. So my question for you is, how long did it take you to create the soundtrack for Witcher 3?
Sure. Well, I was working with Marcin Przybyłowicz on that one, of course, and it took us, for the first one, for The Witcher 3, the base game, right?
Mm-hmm.
Probably guessing around 2 years, couple of hours of music. Yeah, the way it worked was, I was in LA, and every couple of months I would just receive a new batch to compose music for. So I would receive a Excel sheet. It sounds very romantic. Excel sheet list of the cues that I gotta do.
Mm-hmm.
So I got to do combat music for this hub, for this scenery,
Mm-hmm.
and I got to do exploration that couples with it, that pairs with it, right? Because it's important to say that each exploration track would have its own combat music, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that the change between them would be as smooth as possible. So they would share, for instance, the tempo. They would be in the same tempo, and they would be in the same key. So I would receive email from CD Projekt saying, "Hey, Mikolai, we need another 45 minutes. You got 2 months for this." And then I would give them 45 minutes and wait for, I don't know, a month, sometimes 3 months, sometimes half a year. So that's how it worked.
You guys created such perfect sound and music that worked so well with every event, every character, every kingdom that
Thanks.
was in the video game. You went from whimsical and calming to this darker, battle sound. How were these different tracks broken out by event, or how did that creative process work?
Well, I said before that the tracks were divided by hubs. So the world was divided into 3, was it, or 4? I think it was 3, right?
Mm-hmm,
3
mm-hmm.
sub-worlds, and each of the world would have its own sonic color.
Mm-hmm.
Each world would be divided into, I don't remember how many, but I'm guessing 60-ish. I might lie here because I'm not sure. Hubs, right? So those little areas to which each piece of music is assigned. So that would be one way of dividing the music. Second kind would be a special tasks music. Right, special events in the game would happen,
Mm-hmm.
and then obviously we couldn't get with typical combat or typical exploration music. And the third one would be cutscenes, which is like scoring a movie, basically, right?
Okay.
There would be a list of themes, and sometimes there would be a good reason to use certain themes, so
Mm-hmm.
or requirement even. So that helped to glue the whole thing together.
Wow. Yeah, it seems like there are a lot of moving pieces, especially with a world as big as what was in that video game. Um, so sound and music in video games draw the players into the moment and make them super invested into the character that they play, almost sometimes to the point where like they need to turn off the music so they could pay attention and beat that level. I feel like I've heard that so many times. Like my boyfriend in the other room has, even as I was playing the music, to get the particular titles of the track I was looking for, he like his ears perked up and he was like, that reminds me of this and this. And it's just crazy what it can do for the memory and the senses.
Yeah, it's true.
How do you test if the music is a good fit for that particular scene?
Well, uh, instincts is a big part of it, and experience is another big part of it. Instincts, it's actually it's experience in music, it's experience in playing video games as well. So it's I as a composer, and that's something that maybe not all film composers can do if they hadn't played video games. But I need to be able to to figure out how the gameplay should feel, and then towards that, um, shape my music, so to speak. And give it proper amount and proper level of energy, proper level of emotions. Yeah.
So, and that's a good point that you bring up with, the game developers themselves. Typically, when are you brought into the process? Is it like when they're done with the game, or?
No, I would say when they're like 2/3 done or 3/4 done. So after it's like 3 years into the process, let's say. Yeah.
Wow.
2 years.
And I'm very curious. I don't entirely know the process and the background of video game development or like the terminology, but I'm assuming like you have to translate the music into some sort of code. Do you do that yourself, or like do you pass on the music from your system to someone that then translates that into code
Sure.
for the game?
Yeah. Well, this can be done in what you're talking about. This can be done. So making like putting music into game can be done in a couple ways. The best way probably is to use something called middleware. And there's a couple of programs. There are a couple of programs which do it very well. And so I know how they work. I don't usually operate them, and my job is to figure out the interactive part of the music, right? You know what I'm talking about, interactive, like how the music changes according to the choices of the player, or what happens to the player in the gameplay. And so I have to prepare my music in a way that works with that, and then deliver the files. So this can be done either in the middleware, so it's a software between the engine and the music, or it can be done directly in the engine of the game.
Okay.
Without
Okay.
those.
Yeah, and I'm not going to get too into it.
Yeah.
But so then, speaking about the like interactivity of the game, video games are not usually linear like TV or movies.
Yeah.
And for people who don't know what that is, that means that one action does not lead to one result. There isn't like a single way of doing things in games.
Yeah.
In particular, in Witcher 3, there are various twists and turns that can happen depending on what the individual player decides to do.
There are even different endings, right?
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why that game was so hugely popular. Before you composed music for video games like this, you were also, and it sounds like you're also now working with Netflix and you have done films and TVs. How did you approach this difference?
So I'm proud of those little projects because they give me a lot of freedom, and if you know, creatively, freedom is a tough thing, right? If you have all the choices possible, and no one's telling you we want this, then there's a lot of responsibility, and you have to put those borders for yourself, which not to cross, which spices to use for your dish. And if out of nothing or everything, you can come up with something very distinguishable, very defined, that works for the game well, and then hopefully is a good thing to listen to aside from the game, then it's a win for me. And then on the other side of the spectrum are these big AAA games, right? Like the ones I mentioned, like the one, the League of Legends. I did a piece for them at the beginning of the year. And this piece was huge. I mean, it's huge. This so many tracks in this. The mixer that was mixing it, Mark Evans in LA. He said he's man of age, and he said he never mixed a piece that it's that big. And it's a big challenge to do these pieces. Those are like skyscrapers for an architect.
And what makes what makes it so big, like for people that are not familiar, like from the mixing side of things? Like what about it was
the amount of tracks, the amount of instruments to create this massive sound that on one hand is very huge, but on the other hand, it has to be defined, it has to be unique, it has to convey a certain emotion. So it cannot be just this, mass that's like just a noise. It has to be music at the same time. So it's a challenge.
For something as big as the soundtrack that you worked on, would you say that was the most challenging piece to date?
Not challenging, because it was challenging to figure out the color, because it was the new character. His name is Set. That's the new champion in the League of Legends. And so again, I had to come up with a color out of space, out of air, and something that would work. And this took a couple of trials and errors, and then finally we found something. The audio team at League of Legends, the house composers over there are spectacular people, very nice and very helping. So so that was a challenge. And then again, it was just an investment of time. To just keep adding and subtracting, because subtracting is a great creative process as well.
Out of the past 16 years that you've been doing this, what would you say for people that want to do what you're doing? What was the most important thing that you've learned in your career?
The good approach to everything is to think not what you can get from the project, but what you can add to it. How you can contribute. But not a lot of people are saying that you should continuously work on your craft, on your music. Everybody's stressing how important the production is, the production aspect of how great the music sounds, how sexy the music sounds, how polished and modern it sounds. But I don't think enough people are stressing how important it is to know your harmony, your counterpoint, to work on your melodies, the sheer musical aspects. I don't think people are not stressing this enough. So it has to be a good combination of all these things, coupled with people skills. Of course, those are really important.